Let's talk about a story we all think we know, the Great Flood. You know, divine anger, a huge boat, the whole world getting a reset. But what if the story you grew up with isn't the whole story? What if it's just the last chapter of a much older book?
I mean Noah's Ark, right? The animals 2 by 2. We all know it. But here's the big question. Was it the first? What if I told you that this incredible story from Genesis is actually the final version of a tale that people had been telling for thousands of years before? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dig into today.
Okay, so to really get our heads around this, we've got to start with the story we're all familiar with. Let's set our baseline. We're talking about the Genesis flood narrative, the Noah.
So in the Genesis version, the why is super clear, right? God looks down, sees that humanity has just gone off the rails. Wicked, corrupt, the whole deal. And the flood is basically divine justice. And Noah? He's the hero because he's the one good guy left, a righteous man. The whole point is a moral cleansing of the world. And that's the key takeaway here, folks. It is all about morality. Tuck that away, because it's going to be important later.
Okay, now let's hop on our time machine. We're going way back to ancient Mesopotamia. That's modern-day Iraq, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Archaeologists digging there found these amazing clay tablets that told a massive story, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And hidden inside this epic was another flood story. And get this, it's over 1,000 years older than the story of Noah. And the similarities, oh boy, they are just wild.
So, meet our new hero. His name is Utnapishtim. The main character of the epic, Gilgamesh, is on this quest for immortality, and he tracks down Utnapishtim, who's supposedly the only guy who ever survived a world-ending flood and was made immortal by the gods. And the story Utnapishtim tells him, well, let's just say it's gonna ring a few bells.
Okay, look at this. This is where it gets crazy. It's not just, oh, there was a flood. The details are shockingly specific. In both stories, a god warns the hero. Both guys build a giant boat to save their family and a bunch of animals. Both boats end up on a mountain. And this is the real kicker. Both of them send out birds to see if there's any dry land. A raven, a dove. I mean, come on, the plots are practically identical. This can't be a coincidence. No way.
So that just blows the whole thing open, right? If the Noah story lines up so perfectly with the much older Epic of Gilgamesh, then you have to ask, where did the Gilgamesh story come from? Yep, the rabbit hole goes even deeper. The trail doesn't stop here, not by a long shot.
Well, it turns out Gilgamesh wasn't the original either. It was basically borrowing from an even older flood story tradition. Scholars have found bits and pieces of other Mesopotamian flood myths that are even more ancient, with heroes named Atrahasis and, in the oldest fragment we've ever found, a guy named Ziusudra. And this timeline really lays it all out. Look at this, the oldest bit we have, the Ziusudra story, is from around 2100 BCE. Insane. Then a few hundred years later, you get the Atrahasis epic, which is a more complete version. Then that story gets folded into the famous Epic of Gilgamesh. And then, way later, we're talking hundreds of years later, you get the Genesis story. So the biblical account, it's actually the newest kid on the block. It's the last link in this incredibly ancient chain of storytelling. So, where did this all start? What was the original spark? Well, the leading theory is that it began with something real. You gotta remember, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers were everything to Mesopotamian civilization. But these rivers could also flood, and I mean catastrophically. We're talking unpredictable, city-destroying floods. It's not a huge leap to see how the memory of a truly devastating flood, or maybe a series of them, could evolve into a myth about a flood that covered the entire world.
And this right here, this is maybe the most important difference in the whole evolution of the story. Remember how the Genesis story was all about morality? Well, in the older Mesopotamian versions, like the Atrahasis epic, the reason for the flood has nothing to do with morality. The gods want to wipe everyone out because humans are just too noisy, seriously. They're making such a racket that the head god, Enlil, can't get any sleep. It's basically a cosmic noise complaint. It's not a moral problem, it's a practical one for the gods. The why of the story completely flips on its head.
And check out this quote from that older story. It says, after the flood, the hero makes a sacrifice, and the gods gathered like flies over the offering. Like flies. Think about what that means. The gods were starving. They needed humans to feed them with sacrifices. They were desperate. That is a completely different picture from the God in Genesis, right? An all-powerful, self-sufficient being who doesn't need anything from anybody. It's a totally different worldview.
So, let's pull all this together. What does it all mean?
How do we have these stories that echo each other across thousands of years, each one a little different? Well, it's all about the journey the story takes, from the memory of a real event to a powerful statement of belief.
There's a fancy word for this, intertextuality, but all it really means is that stories talk to each other. The ancient Hebrew scribes writing Genesis didn't live in a bubble. These Mesopotamian stories were famous, like the blockbusters of their day. So they weren't just blindly copying. They were taking a story everyone knew and deliberately changing it, retooling it, arguing with it, to make their own unique point about their God and their worldview.
So you can kind of see it happen in 4 steps. First, you have the real event, a terrifying actual flood. Second, that memory turns into a story, a core narrative about survival. Third, that story gets passed around, and different cultures, like the Babylonians and later the ancient Israelites, put their own spin on it to match what they believe. And fourth, that new, powerful version of the story spreads and echoes, influencing other cultures down the line.
So here's the bottom line. The story of Noah's Ark isn't a story that appeared out of nowhere. It's a brilliant reimagining of a much, much older myth. It takes all the familiar pieces, the big boat, the animals, the hero, the birds, and completely changes the reason why it all happened. It's not about cranky gods who can't sleep anymore. It's a deep, powerful story about morality, justice, and the unique relationship between humanity and one single righteous God. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? This whole story shows that some of our most important foundational myths are actually part of this huge, ancient conversation that's been going on for thousands of years. It kind of makes you wonder what other stories that we feel like we know inside and out might have their own hidden history, connecting all of us back to a shared human story. Something to think about.
Thanks for watching our channel. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe.